Okay, so this is using query. What is the date today? My goodness, February 10th. And I think we skipped the last one, so this might have been the first since sometime in January. Well, obviously they're all 2 weeks ago, it was in January. So I actually didn't circulate an agenda for this. I think what we could do is share from the demo that we did on Friday internally, whatever is worth sharing publicly, and then I think Brendan had tapped Casey to preview the browse experience. How does that sound?
Casey, is your machine working? You done a demo?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. Thought you might see my but here. I'm good. Let's
Awesome. Yeah, I think if we start with that, and then I think just as our time to brainstorm around that. So yeah, Casey, if you want to take over, feel free.
Okay, sharing my screen. Can you guys see this guy?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm running query. I'm also running a test registry server, which is in place for now while we are testing the network features before we make it live on cloud. If you head over to this network tab, you'll see a data set. Yeah, a data set that is not currently query node. This is coming off the registry, and if you click it, you can see preview. And if you notice this here, this is the and because it is like muted, I guess you could say, it's letting us know that we don't have that version. Also, there is a data set, a button over here where you can clone the data set and actually bring it into your repo. So if you do that, it clones it and then it brings it into your workbench where you can check it out and then edit it and make it your own. And if you, then also this allows us, we can now publish, when we publish to, well, we could always publish, but when we publish to this network, you can now see your published data sets on the feed as well. If you click it from here, this is the preview of what your data set would look like if somebody else is browsing it. And yeah, that's the main chunk of what we did. None of this, also search. We have added search. So if you you can either type in here, like if we look for that synths data set, press enter, or you can press enter and it'll bring you to this modal. Doing this will bring you to also to the network locally only. So let's say we wanted to see our local version of synths, it would bring us to our workbench. That's what I got.
Fantastic. And if people publish new versions, we can pull those new versions down, right?
Yes. So
that's all right. You don't need to demo, but or maybe you do.
Okay.
You can, if it's on hand.
Yeah. Let me just grab the. So what I'm doing now. If I share again.
Hey, I think you're frozen.
That's funny, Casey's connection is not as good. Oh no, bye Casey.
I think her connection died and she's restarting the app.
That's okay. Yeah. We'll let Casey. We'll let Casey rejoin. Awesome.
I'm back.
Nice. Can you
Okay.
run that demo?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know where I froze, but I asked the temp registry server to make another commit on that data set. And now let's take a look at what that looks like. Let me share this with you. So if I go back to the network and I click on that same data set, you'll notice here that this is, we have a list of things that we need to fix. One of those things is you have this data set now, it should no longer say clone. But if you take a look at the history, we know that you have this version of the data set, and this version you haven't acquired yet. So you know that someone has done some activity to the data set, and now you can take steps to, get that data for yourself. Yay.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining in. Yeah, spirit fingers. This is good. I'm super pumped about this because I think it really sort of like brings together a bunch of stuff that we've been talking about for a while. But yeah, with that in mind, thank you for the demo. I think from here, I'd love to turn our attention back to a document that we have not looked at in a while, and I'm going to repurpose. And it's here. So this is a using query call, and so to that end, I think we should sort of stay focused on a certain sort of subsection of this. But the document I just linked is, I might as well share screen. That's probably the right way to do this, right? Let's do share. Sure, desktop one. Why not? Yeah, and so like this document, I think this used to be called the query commands document. I'm just going to repurpose this to be our query 010 roadmap. If we look at the outline of this, this is like really going through all of the old commands and sort of like, not the old commands, this is like sort of the way the app currently looks, and lists of commands that are in here. This is actually slightly out of date. We have some new commands like fetch that I think should be actually merged and moved into a couple of things. But what I kind of want to focus here is like we're now on what are we on? We're on query 9.5095. Is that right? Is that the one we're on right now? Releases. Let's do this the right way. And 4. And so the next one we can do patch releases from now until the end of time. But I think we should start thinking about query 010 as like a kind of like more meaningful release that we intend to live for a while, that cleans up, is like really oriented towards shipping the features that we currently have in like a nice clean implementation. This isn't a 1.0 release, but I think it's a nice practice for a 1.0 release on like what our API would look like. So to that end, I think we sort of like would like to have a few things specifically in the documentation, but like also like a first stabilized API, HTTP API should be stabilized. So that's like thinking through the endpoints, thinking through things, the way things work. We should have a stabilized WebSockets API. And so like it's a pretty big haul. Like some of the stuff that we should be sort of shipping, including the other bits that really need to go in there are like, each subsystem is finished and tested, which is like a huge lift. But that's like, if we enumerate some of our subsystems, like examples are like Logbook or the Dustin's most recent work on DS Cache. What else are subsystems that we have? There's a bunch, but like a repo, we should clean up our repo interfaces, make sure that everything. And we basically, as the query code base has gotten older, we have a number of like, just like to-dos that have been accumulated all over the place, and like things of like, and we've also for a long time, we've kind of been in this strategy of when we go to write tests, we add tests to the CMD package, which is the top level. And this is kind of like, this is the pattern that we ended up using on desktop to make with the end-to-end tests, to basically say, we want to test some high-level behavior. You should be able to type query save and hit enter with these certain things, and it should work. And these tests are kind of what are keeping us alive right now. They're sort of like things that fail if we don't sort of like do our jobs right. And so like CMD test is a big old one that we've been meaning to replace for a while, that like runs a whole bunch of commands like help, version, config, get, etc. config, save, and then like list, and then show me a specific thing, and like runs kind of these sort of more integration tests. With this document, what I'd love to sort of focus on today is return our attention to this list of commands and really start to think about like what should go into this, because next sprint we have a documentation push coming up, and there's always this question of like, I don't want to write a ton of documentation against a thing that is only going to be sort of deleted or removed type thing. And so what I'd love to do today is just spend some time just like looking at this document and collaboratively editing this document, asking questions about what we think should go into a 0.1.0 release or a 0.10 release of query the backend. And ideally what this really helps us do is just like clean up a lot of language and look for like redundant commands and set some goals on when that 0.10 release should be cut, and start having a discussion about things that should be or shouldn't be in it. There's no deadline on this. This isn't something that we're going to ship. It will ship it when it's ready, but the one side of this that would be really nice is being able to sort of say, this is how the documentation should start to shape up, and we can actually make those changes much sooner and make that as part of our documentation push next sprint. So I know we've done this once, but I think it totally bears doing another round of this. Like in the past, we've stuck with save for a little while, and we have the idea of commit here. I'd love to just take like 5-10 minutes to go through some of this document and like edit it, update it, bring it up to speed. Actually not 5-10 minutes, 10 minutes. So let's just take 10 minutes starting at 2:15 to 2:25 to take a look at this and just look at the documentation part of like, okay, cool. How do we think this should look in the near term future? But just near enough that nothing new is invented. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. So when I start a timer, 2:25, we'll all come back. On the video version of this, we will just cut out. Okay, it's 10. I've got a couple of bits, but does anybody want to start? Things they've noticed? Anything that jumping out? Or
I just noticed how rename is saying that renames are dangerous and you shouldn't do them, which is out of date because they're okay now.
I think it's really interesting how much the like cruft accumulates, and like we don't spend time in this space a lot. And so I already could feel a couple of small PRs that would move things forward a bunch. Yeah, and so to that end, I think what was I going to say? I think there's some like, I want to save some time for discussion of the two big questions that seem to be cropping up a bunch that feel unresolved from like a functionality perspective. One we were talking about on Friday as a team, which is this notion of publication and like what does publishing do. And the other thing we've been discussing, we haven't really discussed, but I think we should surface here and now because it's less finished, is the idea of we run git pull to sort of like fetch updates to stuff. Like what is the, what should that look like for a query when you've cloned a data set? And this is a question that like we're actually dealing with on the browse side, like this sprint. Just like, okay, I've cloned a data set, now what, right? Like when I revisit that thing, how do I continually fetch this sort of like, do I continually fetch updates? Do I continually fetch blocks? How does that work? So it's the opposite of publish. It's kind of the subscribe side of publish. But the way that Git solves this is anytime you want to get updates, you run git pull, and that Git pulls all the data from, basically does a giant synchronization to the thing you're pulling from, and then you get to sort of like, it'll try and resolve any issues right then and there. Yeah, anybody have any first thoughts on how that should work or what they think? Sort of like, oh, Chris, you've got something. Do you want to talk through it?
Yeah, just, I mean, off the top of my head, like query clone should just get head by default, but could have a flag to pull down everything. And then there's like pull, pull, you can specify, I don't know, do we need, I guess fetch, equivalent is fetch, like query fetch can get the logbook entries, but that can happen via, and query pull can be like specifying a specific version you want to pull down. Does that make sense? Like you can't pull if you haven't already cloned, and if you already have if you already have a version and you try and pull it, it'll just say nope, you already have it.
Yeah, I think that works. My question is like, should we back up even more and think about like pull as the like operative thing? Because to me, we have the block conversation, but then we have the logbook conversation, and the two are kind of separate. our version of logbooks is a little more, not more robust, but it gives you more information than Git does. And so like I would like to get into a world where that is happening as frequently and as automatically as possible, where I just know that updates exist without having to really do much. But in the command line world, we really don't want to be doing too many things on behalf of a user without them really like knowing. And so for me, that's a huge like source of question marks. I feel like on the desktop side of things, I'm really happy with just like, as soon as you navigate to a data set that you've cloned, like we should just fetch the logbook data for that and try and get that immediately. I don't know what to do on the CLI side of things because maybe we need clone. But yeah, just a point of clarification. Currently, query fetch only gets logs. It doesn't do anything with. So like we'd have to rerun clone, I guess, to get new data. It's a giant open question.
What do you mean rerun clone to get new data?
Like, do we use like if I just run query clone, again it should get the block data for head that's updated, and then if I do query clone with a specific reference, then it should clone the block data. Basically, clone moves blocks. And then we need some command for just move logs. Currently, fetch does that and doesn't save logs. But maybe we make fetch save logs.
Okay. I mean, off the top of my head, it feels wrong to clone a second time. You only clone once unless you delete the whole thing, and then you clone again. But I think cloning is in Git world is a one-time thing until such time that I've removed this thing off my machine entirely. So if we can we echo that and say you only clone once, and then if you like you have to be more. There's got to be some other command for fetching the logbooks and then also pulling down blocks. Like is that what pull should be maybe? It sounds.
Others?
I know we want to move away from add, but this is one of the advantages of using add because it kind of implies like the two different use cases here.
Yeah, add it is not clone, and yeah.
Is there a reason we don't? Can you mute Rico? Oh, thank you. Is there a reason why we are not? Is there some reason we want there to be fewer commands that are loaded with meaning rather than have different commands that do the thing that they say they're going to do? Like clone means copy it to yourself. Pull means give me all the new stuff. Fetch means for us, I guess. Fetch and pull kind of mix in my head, and I don't know what the difference between that, but I don't think that clone should also mean give me all the new stuff.
Yeah, okay. So we have a universal dislike for reusing the word clone. I'm on board with that. That's just the way that it works right now, and we need to get past that. So I'm glad we all agree that doesn't feel right to copy a Git command and then make it do something different. That to me is like a general like rule that I think we should try and stick with. I think we should get rid of the word fetch entirely and try to fold it into other things. But to your point, Casey, like power operations on the CLI are really frustrating, right? Like when you run a command and it has some side effect that does a different thing, that to me in command line world is really, really irritating because you're constantly having like use flag. Like to me, it drives me nuts that there is actually git fetch and git pull, and git pull is do all the fetch and then fast forward rebase my current thing, which is actually to me really frustrating. But they just recommend you do git pull because it's really easy. Yeah, I think the reason we sort of started with add and remove is because we were really based in this, like what the original version of query was based around blocks and just add blocks and remove blocks, and it was really that's kind of straightforward. I don't know. Add feels really weird though, because like when we went to go build that website, the button on Query Cloud, like add just didn't resonate. Yeah, and then what I think for Query Fetch does right now should move into Query Log, and so it's just like I could do log of any data set, a data set I don't have, a data set that I do have. But I guess the like operative question is like, yeah, like what command do you picture running relatively frequently? To like set your hands up, it would be like change directory into a FSI link directory. What do you type to say like, cool, update me? And what do you expect to happen there?
Yeah, I think you just mentioned writing query log, and I feel like query log, query log I expect to do what GitLog does, and just show me everything. Here's what I know, but I haven't really talked to anybody else lately. So it would just be like a learned behavior of I need to do status and see the last time stuff was gotten. Or maybe even status can actually do the fetch behind the scenes and be like, here's what you have, and then here's what I also know about, but you have to do something explicit to pull it down. So I could like maybe it could tell you about it, but like it won't actually take effect on your local environment until you actually say like pull this down, and now it's actually synced up. So maybe it could just tell you that there's a difference, and then you can act on that. I don't know. That's all I'm saying right now off the top of my head.
I do love that. I love the idea of query status doing an ephemeral log fetch in the background. That's really interesting.
How do you feel about query look? Like basically like look and see if there's new stuff.
Can I run look across like, and can look do like a compact version of everything?
Right. I mean, because that's kind of the idea. It's like it's more of a passive action where you're kind of observing like what's out there to see if there's something new. Yeah.
It inherently, the word look inherently implies don't do anything. Just like look.
It's like observe and like get info of like what's going on, which is kind of what logbook is, in that it's coordinating stuff, but more in the background.
Totally, yeah. And that, I think look opens up a really wonderful conversation about one of the meaning mixings that we're starting to do. Like is some of our commands, if they do both things, are when used in one context, it's a very browse-oriented thing. Like if I run query log on a data set that I don't have, I'm fetching the logs remotely. This isn't how it works right now, but I'm proposing that we make it basically a look style command where you're just like looking at the logs for a data set that you don't currently have. Which to me is really convenient. If I can just type query log for whatever I want to see logs, whether I have the logs or not, that feels really nice to me. But then I think that the other side of this is this thing that you run every time you change into a project and want to sync with people you've been working with. And so like to me, yeah, like look is like one side of it, or the act of looking, whether that's like verbiage that describes commands or an actual command. It's like to me, if we have look and get, we have query get, but that does something completely different.
I kind of like fetch as a way to pull in new versions, actually, like what add is doing now. And like I think fetch could also mean clone. I don't know if that's like good language for the desktop app or like cloud. But yeah, like fetch is just like, you're retrieving something, but it's actually pulling it down. But it's not implying the thing that clone and fork do, where they're kind of like an initial operation to set something up.
Yeah, I like fetch because it to me, for this purpose, because to me it says I'm not doing new things. I'm not making edits. I'm just fetching what other people have done. And I think we could overload that. We could make the default value of fetch do logs and blocks, and so then I could do logs and blocks of heads. And so query fetch, if I just cd to a working directory, I could do query fetch with no flags. That would update my logbook, get all the commits, and then fetch the blocks of the latest commit so that query diff works properly. And then if I did query fetch all versions with a flag, like a flag all versions, that would go grab all the blocks, and then query fetch logs only, that would just update my logbook.
Well, that's what query look would be. What, right?
Yeah, to me, I would like query look. That phrase to me, I'm a little concerned about look get, and like some of and to me, that's starting into the conversation about the browse experience on the command line, which to me is like basically the big command we have there right now is search. And like does look is look different enough from get, if get were a remote operation on datasets that you don't actually have. You know what I mean?
I mean, look could be a thing where it's like with no parameters, it's just getting everything, right? It's pulling logs for every data set you care about. But if you give it, like the difference is that look is never gonna like produce JSON output, right? It's just basically modifying the logbook state. Whereas you use get when you're like, I want to, you know, get the head or meta, you know.
Right, but yeah, I guess my question, look to me feels like it should be totally non-destructive. Like if I'm just looking at something, it should never have a write action.
Does that include not modifying logbook?
Yeah. Because I'm just looking at stuff, right? I'm not, like to me, there's like a side effect there. If I look at the act of looking at something, updates things locally for me in a way like that could.
Well, the way I was thinking about it was like logbook's whole thing is that it's, you know, append only, and it's not, there's never destructive actions. The metaphor I was thinking of is like you look, you know, you've obtained the knowledge of what you see. It's never modifying things you'd want to undo anyway. Like that was the
right, because you can undo logbook stuff. Yeah.
But I mean, look. Sorry, I'm trying to follow along with what you two are debating right now. I feel like it's. I don't know. When I think of
a little highfalutin.
No, I mean, like what's. I think of looking at a data set that's remotely, you know, that if I look at something that I don't have on my machine, it's basically getting a log, right? It's getting the logbook records, but you're like Brendan, you're saying you don't want to write that to my logbook. So like my query doesn't actually know about it. It's literally just asking the network, what does the log for this thing look like, and displaying it to me, and then it's just gone. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, basically. I think that's the thing we're discussing is like, is look part of the synchronization conversation? Does it persist anything? Exactly what you said.
Yeah, I was suggesting that look is literally the way to modify logbook. Like it's like that's the purpose I was imagining.
But I mean, but isn't that problematic if I look at 100 data sets that I don't care about and never decided to download, and now I just am cluttering up my logbook? I mean, is that a bad thing?
Yeah, and I think this is where I think the heart of this problem is we really kind of inherited this from IPFS, where we have the notion of there's like the universal world of data that is on the network, and then we have our local stuff, and all of our commands kind of like subtly behave differently when you have it locally and when you have it remotely. And the world of IPFS wants us to think about everything as being local, right? Like if you look at all the commands in the way that IPFS is sort of like set up, you're supposed to be able to just like stat and log and look at data that you don't have, and IPFS is going to take care of fetching everything for you and doing all the work under the hood for you. Where that really starts to fall apart is latency, right? Like just networks aren't fast, and stuff that you have on your hard drive is in our world we've added on top of latency. But that's the problem in IPFS land. But in our world we now have this like stateful notion of a collection, right? Data that I care about, and the way that our collection interacts with our commands is something that I think we got to sort of like spend some time fleshing out. I do really like the thoughts that look sort of the word look really sort of shakes out. I don't think that it fills a hole that we can't fill with existing commands quite yet. To me, like if we repurposed fetch, to me that is closer to what I think you're describing, Dustin. There does feel like there is this hole for like, I just want all of my collection and I just want to know what's changed, like the same way that you run like yarn update dash latest. It's just take all my data sets, get me all the most recent stuff. And I think that's going to be a really common command. I have no idea what that looks like.
Fast forward.
Fast forward, yeah.
FF for short.
I like it. Or maybe just query fetch with nothing, no commands, and not in a working directory.
I don't know. I mean, there's the danger in having too many possible operations for one command. Like that's what Git kind of ran into.
Yeah, and that's what Casey's getting at in a big way. I think it's a question of like, why does everything do a million things?
What's the, sorry, going back, what do we need look if, I mean, isn't what look would do just the same thing that log would do? Or is it like you have to know to do look for things you don't have and log only works for things you do have?
That's the thing I'd like to avoid. I'd like to avoid, I kind of want to have my cake and eat it too, right? Like I want it, if it's a thing that I care about, I want it to just like grab the stuff and do the right thing. And if it's a thing that I'm just like investigating and like browsing and looking at, I don't want it to save things.
So I could see log, log should just tell you where it got that information from, right? It should be like, I'm reporting you, I can report the log and say, it either came from my local logbook, which hasn't been updated since X, Y, and Z time, or you can run it with like a get latest flag, and then it will say, I checked every available source. This is like all that is known to the universe about this thing. And if you don't have it, then it'll just report back and be like, this came from the registry or came from cloud or something, and by the way, you don't have it, but here's the log, and then it never gets written anywhere, and then it just as long as it informs you when it's writing the output, like where it got this information from, like you can use the same command.
Totally. I love that idea of just reporting back, the point of origin. That to me feels like it should be in either way. Like it's like this is the same way that working directory says, like when you type query status, it tells you what you're getting the status of. You get like for dataset, blah. This is what's happening. We should be doing that. Like we should probably just change that language, like for your local dataset, blah, or for linked dataset, blah. And if I type query log, for remote dataset, blah. Yeah, I like that.
Actually, on that note, like, can I query status something I don't have?
No.
Oh no, status is only for FSI.
Yeah.
I guess, is there a thing that's not looking at a full log and individual commits that is just more of like a data set summary? You know what I mean? Is there like, I could see that being more interesting, than actually seeing individual commit messages, is just being like, here's like a 10-line overview of this data set, including like one line that just says like last updated or last commit. And I can just run that and just bring my eye down to that last commit line and always know whether it's current, or you can color code it as like, red if it's not in sync with what I have locally or something like that.
Yeah, this is actually the infrastructure that we've been building out for this sprint for the browse experience. We could so that where that actually goes in the CLI is a big question, but remotes now have the concept of previews, and previews are exactly what you're describing, in my opinion, where it's like logs is like the overview of time, and then previews is like gives you a version info, so that's going to show you details about a commit.
But there's no command for that right now, or it's just get preview. I don't know.
Probably just query get, and then the name of a data set you don't have is what I think it should be. It's like getting that, and then that pairs nicely with query get body of a thing, and that's component previews, which we have in another section. But cool. I do want to cut. I think we have a bit of a hard stop in the next couple of minutes, but this is lots to think about, and I think this is the really big sort of like conversation that I'd love to make some inroads on for this 0.10 release. Is just like sort out our language for this and establish a good set of answers to these questions, even if they're kind of more working hypotheses. But the biggest thing I wanted us to do from the CLI perspective is pick a lane on how we handle local versus remote, and like have opinions around what that means. And then ideally that'll help us like just explain this stuff more consistently. Yeah. Sound good? Thanks for listening to me blather on for whatever. Hopefully this was a more participatory discussion, but with that, I think our next call is next Tuesday. not Monday, and that's where we are going to. Is that right, Rico?
I think it's going to be on Thursday because we're demoing on Thursday.
All right.
Is that right?
Yes.
And that'll be a building query call / sprint demo.
Yes, that's totally right. So that's this Thursday.
Yep.
We'll probably show a more refined version of what Casey demoed today.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, everybody.
All right.